When people rush to explain themselves the moment they are challenged, they often believe they are protecting their position. In reality, they are revealing their fear. True confidence does not scramble for defense. It waits. It listens. It measures its words. History has shown us repeatedly that the loudest reactions often come from those who sense their foundations beginning to shift. Power that is secure does not panic. Power that is fragile does. My brothers. My sisters. Listen, not just with your ears, but with memory. It was a Sunday morning. The kind that feels suspended in time. Across the Atlantic, in Brooklyn, the sun was climbing slowly between buildings. Streets were quiet. The city had not yet fully decided to wake. In apartments and homes, people moved through familiar rituals without knowing they were about to be interrupted. Then the silence cracked. Phones vibrated almost in unison. Screens lit up. Notifications layered over one another. Social feeds began racing forward. YouTube refreshed endlessly as a live transmission started circulating faster than explanation could keep pace. This message did not come from a Western capital. It was not issued by a think tank or filtered through a press secretary. It did not arrive dressed in diplomacy. It came from here. From Ouagadougou. From Burkina Faso. From a place long spoken about, but rarely listened to. What appeared on screen was simple. A man seated before a camera. No theatrics. No visual manipulation. No urgency manufactured by graphics or sound. Just a voice, steady and unshielded. It was me. Captain IBRAHIM Traoré. I spoke not as a symbol, but as a witness. A witness to a history that refuses to stay buried. I am young, they say. Too young to challenge old orders. Too young to stand without permission. They call me reckless. They call me militant. They say I took control of my nation. They say I confronted France and the systems that lingered long after colonial flags were lowered. They are correct in the facts. They misunderstand the reason. I did not act for recognition. I did not act to be remembered. I acted because dignity had been postponed for too long. That Sunday message was not confined to the borders of Burkina Faso. It was not addressed solely to Africans on the continent. It was meant for those scattered by history. For descendants whose surnames no longer trace back to villages. For those whose roots survived only in fragments, in rhythm, in instinct. The camera did not move. I wore my daily uniform, not as a costume, but as proof of function. This was not ceremony. It was labor. Behind me, there were no palaces, no gold, no illusions of wealth. There were maps. Old maps. Maps drawn before Africa was sliced apart and redistributed like inventory. Africa was never empty. Africa was never waiting to be claimed. Africa was occupied by its own people. On the walls were faces that still challenged the present. Thomas Sankara. Patrice Lumumba. Malcolm X, men whose lives were cut short, but whose ideas grew stronger in death. Their images were not decoration. They were reminders that leadership carries consequence. For nearly 40 minutes, I spoke. And the words moved without passports. They crossed water. They slipped into living rooms and dorms and kitchens. They settled into places where memory had long been restless. I began with truth. Not softened. Not diluted. Slavery. Colonialism. Two forces that fractured an entire people. One half remained bound to the land. The other was torn away, renamed, and forced to forget itself. You were taken. Loaded into ships. Stripped of names. Stripped of language. Stripped of memory. But I said this clearly. Never believe that Africa forgot you. Africa did not forget. Africa was silenced. I confronted the lie repeated until it hardened into accepted history. The claim that Africans willingly sold their own people. I told the truth. Resistance was widespread. Kingdoms fought. Leaders refused. Many died for that refusal. Guns enforced the trade. Religion softened the violence with scripture while conquest followed behind it. Division was deliberate. Confusion was strategic. Languages were beaten out. Names erased. Lineage severed. And still, something survived. The rhythm in your movement. The cadence in your speech. The music that finds you without instruction. That is Africa speaking through what could not be erased. Across the ocean, the response was not loud at first. It was internal. In barber shops, music was turned down. In churches, prayers paused. In living rooms, people leaned closer to their screens. They were not consuming content. They were being recognized. Then my tone shifted. This was not only about what was taken. This was about what is happening now. Burkina Faso. Mali. Niger. The Sahel is changing. We are dismantling modern systems of control. Not chains, but contracts. Not soldiers, but debt structures. Not governors, but intermediaries trained elsewhere. We are reclaiming land. Reclaiming resources. Reclaiming education. Reclaiming the right to decide. They fear this. Not because of force. Because memory disrupts obedience. They fear Sankara because he demonstrated that dignity does not require approval. They eliminated the man. They failed to eliminate the idea. Then I spoke the truth that unsettled them most. What they fear is not protest. It is reunion. What happens if those taken and those who remained recognize one another again? I announced something unprecedented. A pathway home. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger would open citizenship pathways for descendants of enslaved Africans. Not symbolic gestures. Tangible belonging. Land access. Participation in rebuilding communities. If you feel displaced, I said, it is not because you lack worth. It is because land was taken from you. Land can be reclaimed. I spoke directly to lives, not demographics. To the young men watched by patrol cars. To the woman preserving erased history at home. To the artist with influence but no grounding. To the elder carrying grief older than memory. This was not an escape plan. This was an invitation to build. I spoke to those with global platforms as well. Influence unused is weight wasted. The initiative carried an ancient name. Sankofa. Go back and retrieve what was lost. This was not charity. This was not rescue. Africa does not need saviors. Africa needs partners in repair. When the broadcast ended, silence followed. Not emptiness. Wait. In apartments and dorm rooms, people sat motionless. Something had shifted internally, quietly, without instruction. Western outlets dismissed it quickly. Labeled it symbolic. Empty. Performative. But online, the question spread. Was this real? Was this manipulation? Or was history bending? The response came fast. Sanctions. Smears. Accusations. Pressure designed to exhaust momentum. I did not retreat. People who survived chains do not tremble at economic threats. Another message followed. Africa is not a graveyard. Africa is fertile ground. A gathering was announced. And people came. Flights filled. Elders arrived slowly. Youth sold possessions. One woman said she needed to touch the soil before her time ended. The movement stepped out of theory. Ouagadougou transformed. Faces from every corner of the diaspora arrived. Different accents. Same longing. No spectacle. No fireworks. Libations poured. Names spoken. Songs rose. I entered without guards. I did not need them. A pact was presented. Shared responsibility. No extraction. Mutual growth. A council formed beyond inherited institutions. Ideas became structures. Clinics. Schools. Farms. Studios. Communication networks beyond surveillance. Resistance grew louder. Smears intensified. Betrayal surfaced. An internal coup was attempted. It failed. Not because of weapons alone. Because people stood. I stepped aside briefly. To remind everyone this was not built around one man. When I returned, the work continued without hesitation. Families arrived. Communities took shape. Children learned names erased from textbooks. Pressure tightened. Lies multiplied. Doubt entered quietly. Truth emerged. Fabrications collapsed. The cost remained heavy. Some left. Some stayed. I withdrew again. Not in defeat. In trust. Borders pressed. Sanctions deepened. Inside, something held. Unity. One night, helicopters hovered. Orders echoed. Threats announced. Then my voice cut through. Freedom is not delivered. It is chosen. The people rose. Not with weapons. With presence. Women sat in the roads. Children stood behind them. The advance stopped. Later, I spoke publicly one final time. You were never weak. You were never lost. You were never forgotten. Liberation is a decision. I stepped into the crowd. Into anonymity. Into faith. Years later, children would study this moment. Not as myth. As correction. Not as a man's rise. As a people remembering themselves. Beneath a baobab tree, a simple plaque remains. It reads, "A man came. The people answered. The rest belongs to you."